Good morning. Welcome to a tertiary world and further accounts of the memories that arose as I walked down Pigdon Street in 2008 as part of a project titled A Tertiary World, where I walked down 14 streets that formed a grid inside which I had lived. Pigdon Street is the 4th street, East-West Street. Its colour is green. This is the 3rd memory, the corner of Pigdon and Ray. Walking from Canning Street to Clifton Hill one day in 1969 in order to visit my sister, I began to weep. I can't remember why now, but I wept quite a bit in those days. I crossed Nicholson Street and headed past the Tramways Board After Work Recreation Centre on Pigdon Street, still weeping. As I came to Ray Street, I looked up to watch for oncoming traffic. It was then that I had noticed a hand-painted sign on the corner shop that said in lowercase lettering, Champion Milk Bar. It was new because I'd walked past this corner almost daily and I had never seen this milk bar before. The irreverent optimism that led whoever had painted it to declare this to be the Champion Milk Bar was so overwhelming, it instantly made me smile. As I stood back to admire it, a young man came out and asked me whether I liked the sign. He said his family had just migrated from Beirut and they were so happy to be there. I asked him what that name really meant. In Arabic, he patiently explained, the word champion corresponds to a paradigm, something far more substantial than what we understand to simply be the winner of a competition. In other words, this Champion Milk Bar still had to prove its worth. For now, it was simply the ideal milk bar. But he and his family, he laughingly asserted, were certainly going to work hard to prove they were the best. I walked away full of these considerations. Everything we do is potentially a champion milk bar, I thought. At least in the Arabic meaning of the word. Merit needs to be continually proven, though we can certainly lay claims to aspiring to ideals. As I walked through the Edinburgh Gardens, I came to think that one couldn't do better than to aspire to live one's life dedicated to the gradual construction of the self as a champion milk bar, attempting to live a balanced and generous life through the steady acknowledgement of a declared ideal. I remember that by the time I reached my sister's house, I was determined to hang on to this precious thread of insight I had so fortuitously gained and follow the path it indicated towards whatever lay ahead. As I reached the front yard in Russell Crescent, I saw that she was bent over, busily working on a new flower bed. "What are you smiling at?" she said, straightening up, unused to seeing me so cheerful. "Nothing," I replied, "except that suddenly I think of you as a champion gardener, that's all." She turned and slowly surveyed the garden, its mixture of newly planted flower beds and weeds in which lay a few broken clay pots and a half brick or two. "That'll be the day," she replied with a sigh. She turned towards me with a hint of a smile, the corners of her mouth only very slightly tilted upwards. Princess Hill Primary School, the 4th memory, its colour is green. My children went to school here. The playgrounds are spaciously sunny and dotted with shade trees, and the turn-of-the-century buildings are sound and clean. The first school day, the first cross country, the first fall from the monkey bars, all happened here. 10 years earlier, I had received driving lessons from my father in the street adjoining the school, and later a patient and silent RACV driving instructor, dressed impeccably in shirt and tie, taught me how the three-point parking technique in this very same spot. All my friends' children also went to school here, and I can't help but wonder where they have all gone now, those little fresh faces full of astonishment at the constant discoveries, like the sounds a violin can make, or the awesome power of a pure red colour. Parents' souls were being constantly filled to the brim with wonder during that time, simply through watching our children experience life each day anew. Recently, I've thought that, even if after so many years, the huge errors of judgment that we constantly made throughout the unfolding of our lives now seem to me like unpardonable mistakes. They in part might have occurred through the endless optimism generated by the hearts of our children. It washed over us each day, replenishing our increasing aridity with the rich nutrients of a benignly innocent goodwill. Had we not been awed each evening by its wonder as we tucked our children into bed and listened to their accounts of the day's events, tumbling out of their souls like so many timely and exquisitely wrapped gifts, we might have lived more prudent, perhaps even wiser lives. But the raw ache they gifted me with each day, the ache that descends on you as you slow up and finally register the inexpressible beauty of the ever-changing world, a world infinitely larger than can ever be contained within the self, also kept me restlessly vigilant, surer than ever that there was more to what was unfolding around me than I could comprehend, and certainly more that I could encompass. In the face of this knowledge, the wise ones breathe deeply and surrender, whilst those like me accelerate their search into the expanded world, grabbing aimlessly at the glittering fish swimming all around, like a child attempts to reach for the sky. I know better now, and I understand how in the blink of an eye, mindless seeking can turn into the kind of blind selfishness that sucks moisture out of every living thing around it. But I refuse to not feel inordinately grateful to them, despite everything, despite my utter acceptance of my own selfishness, for the universal paradox they uncovered each day. In the face of its splendid revelation, I was kept raw and unbalanced, constantly reaching out towards its apparently reconcilable extremes in order to stumble, fall, get up, and then fall again. Though all it required in order to be reconciled was a detached acknowledgement, similar in nature perhaps to what Albert Camus describes as the benign indifference of the universe. I know now that in order to reach this state, I needed to fall endlessly. And in the way Italo Calvino describes the life journey of his alter ego, Mr. Palomar, the falling has not yet ended. For triggering this seemingly unproductive and stubborn wakefulness, I have each of my children to thank. Though this was written 12 years ago, the thanking goes on relentlessly each day. Until tomorrow for more Pigdon Street memories, recollections. Until then.